for today's woman as the most common pressures?
Yeah, I feel like one of the biggest societal pressures that comes up is the idea of good girl conditioning.
Oh,
Feel like this is something that constantly comes up, even though I love that women today want to fight against it. And
yes,
as we should, is what I'm going to say to
absolutely.
that, right? But this is like messaging that we've received in our childhood to be agreeable, polite, nice, right? Basically, we're told to never show our anger or allow people to violate our boundaries or,
Mm,
hey, hide your own needs and, your feelings just to please other people, right? And at the end of the day, this is sending a message to girls directly or indirectly that, these are the norms that are placed on.
yes. Hmm.
This is what you should be doing.
Yeah, and that your feelings don't matter, your needs don't matter, your
Mhm.
desires don't matter, and no wonder we're also in a generation where, there are a lot of people who are suffering and struggling silently,
Yes.
especially women, because it's funny, you say all of those things about that good girl syndrome or complex, and you know, I think we can look back at older generations and see how that certainly was the case. I'm with you. I think that's still the case. I think though that we're at a point in history where some of us are fighting back. Like,
Mhm.
the great thing about emotions is that there are a wide range of emotions,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
And I for one don't really classify emotions as good or bad. They
No.
just are, and they provide us with information
Mhm.
to help us navigate life. And so if we are living in ways that keep us detached and removed from our real felt experiences, it makes it difficult for us to navigate, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. And, you know, I was thinking a lot about this, right? And I feel like even for me when I was growing up, right? It's always you're called, oh, well, you're so mature for your age.
Mhm,
Oh, you're so, great at listening and doing what you're told to do and just being so polite. You're so mature for your age. But why
mhm.
are we equating those two things to
Come
be
on.
right? And so it's what we're basically being told is that our worth comes from sacrificing our own needs at the end of the day.
Woo, woo.
So, no duh that women are going into this freeze or fawn trauma response, right?
Yeah,
Like fawn meaning like, hey, I'm going to avoid this conflict. So I'm just going to go and people please at the end of the day.
yeah,
That's what the message is then.
yeah. And that's so harmful to the self. Your feelings about yourself, your self-worth, your ability to envision something new for your future, it can be so damaging. That's a good one. Are there other things that come in mind when you think about societal pressures for today's women?
Yeah, I think a lot of it also comes down to balance, right? So,
Mm,
like you said, like the balancing act, right? So, a lot of it comes down to, well, women are expected to manage the household in some sort of way or form, right? It doesn't have to be the traditional cooking, cleaning, but, you know, growing up, I always heard a woman is the glue of the household. And I
mhm.
don't know if that applies to every household because I don't think it does. But I think there is that one person that holds a household together.
Yes.
And traditionally, that was the role that a woman played, right? And then, but we also all want our own careers, right? We also want our own lives,
Mhm.
right? We want that self care and stuff. So that balancing can become quite difficult because how do you do that without feeling guilty at the end of the day?
Mm, that's so true. It's so true. I also think about one societal pressure, definitely for women, is the expectations around people being coupled,
Yes.
married, and, in relationships that lead to marriage.
Hmm. I think that's a huge one.
Yeah.
I
You know,
think that's almost like a society has set that to be the standard, right?
mhm, mhm.
You
Yeah.
can't be happy without that.
Yeah, and I think that's some of the messaging that you get. I think especially with like people that I see who are very career oriented, um, not that they don't necessarily care about a relationship or they don't want a relationship, but they may be in a season of their life where they're making a choice, or it may be in their best interest to delay,
Mhm.
long-term committed relationship for a season that may be more appropriate based on, where they are in
Yeah.
pursuing their education or starting their career and things of that nature. And I know that this is the year of our Lord 2024. I don't
Mhm.
know about you, but I still hear a lot of conversation around that issue from young women.
Yep.
This pressure, this societal pressure, this family pressure and expectations around
Yeah.
like getting married and starting a family.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think a lot of that also comes down to like the idea of feminine energy, right? When we talk about that, we talk about a woman being soft and giving and nurturing and
Yes.
caring, right? Very compassionate, right? But women are not just all that.
Oh, come on.
We are so much more. We are strong. We are bold. We are
Yes.
powerful. We are innovative, right? And that in itself, when you're putting that into, the whole element of feminine energy becomes this whole thing where
Yes.
people don't know how to handle it.
Yeah. Like we can be, as women, we can be both and
Hmm.
not
Exactly.
either or. We can
Hmm.
be both and I think that is the space that we're kind of moving into,
Yeah.
where I see more women giving themselves permission
Hmm.
to be exactly who they are and to like embrace these different sides of themselves and not just keep themselves relegated to these societal pressures and images, that are kind of placed upon
Yeah.
people. So I
Absolutely.
love that. I love that, because it's there's like you said, there's nothing wrong with being soft and nurturing and kind and or docile.
Yeah.
Right?
There's
Those some of those things are virtuous, and there's also nothing wrong with having, being married or having a committed partner or building a
Mhm.
family.
Mhm.
But I think what is best for people is what they desire and what they
Absolutely.
want for themselves and the life that they want to be, and not so much what people tell them that they have to do or need to do. That
Mhm.
typically doesn't work well for folks.
No, it's all individualized,
Yeah,
right? That
sure.
is why we have so many different opportunities in the world.
Mhm.
That is why we are all so blessed to have these opportunities that exist because there is no one right way for everyone.
No. Mm-mm.
And there never will be, let's be honest.
No. And I think one of the things that has really been fun for me, is being, in connection with women who are, like, in their 50s and approaching 60s who have never been married.
Yeah.
They do not have children,
Mhm.
you know, and they've had vibrant careers in many different types of
Yeah.
fields, but they talk about their process of working through
Right.
those pressures and what it's been like for them along the way, and what it was like to finally arrive to the place where they were accepting
Mhm.
that, you know, maybe honestly that's not what they wanted or desired, or it just didn't work out that way. But they're still living and leading very beautiful lives of connectivity and
Mhm.
intimacy and joy. And so
Yeah.
that doesn't define them.
No, and it should never.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. Love it. So here's another question. Can you give some examples of how these pressures impact women's mental health? Right. So
Oh.
we talked about the pressures. How does that translate to our mental health?
Oh, where do we start with this one? That's a huge topic of its own. You know what, though? Let's start off with the idea of the lack of autonomy.
Mm,
Right. So, when people don't have a say into what they want to do because of whether it be pressures or, oh, what will people think? What will people say? Whatever it is, I mean, that just takes a hit to so many different things about you. It takes a hit to your self esteem, your
yes.
self awareness, right? Your own self love, your own self care, right? All of your wants and needs. There's so many different elements that it's kind of like a domino effect that happens. And when that happens, then, that's where we kind of start seeing symptoms of anxiety, depression,
Mm,
maybe even relationship conflict because those around you aren't supportive, right?
mm.
And it really delves deeper into all of these huge things that, I feel like we don't really sometimes take a second to see how that's going to affect us at the end of the day, right? Unawareness of your emotions, even like that's a huge thing, right?
Yeah. But and you're right, because it's a dangerous thing to be at a place in our lives where we're disconnected from ourselves.
Yeah.
We have a lot of conversation about relationships, and most of the time that has to do with our relationships with other people, but very little do we talk about our relationship with ourselves.
Mhm.
right? And so what
Absolutely.
happens if we've got all of these outside voices and noise that maybe aren't aligned with
Mhm.
who we are or where we are in a season and what it is that we want and we need?
Mhm.
And then simultaneously, we if we feel disconnected from ourselves and we feel disconnected from others, you're right, it can create these situations where people really begin to struggle.
Mhm.
Sometimes, like you said, like, with the worry, fear, shame, and
Mhm.
you're right, that's when those mental health issues show up.
Yeah. And that's why, we really, even in counseling, I feel like we
Mhm.
really want to start off with that foundational stuff, right?
Yeah.
Let's address those worries. Let's address
Right.
those fears. Let's address that guilt, that shame, right? That self esteem that's taken a hit.
Yeah.
Because until we can really tackle that, how can we really acknowledge how those are really creating those symptoms that we're talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. And then that's it just reminded me of something of how, when we see people in counseling and they tell us all about the trouble that they're having in their lives, in their relationships, with their sleep, on their jobs, those are just symptoms
Hmm.
of some other things that are going on,
Yeah.
And like I think that's why conversations like this are so important because I think oftentimes as a society we can be very unaware and
Hmm.
detached from how seemingly simple everyday things can impact people's mental health in major ways.
Absolutely. That reminds me, a huge thing that sometimes does come up is I just feel like I can't concentrate lately.
Mm,
I
mhm.
feel like I can't do anything. Like my mind's there, but I need to get this done and I don't know
Yeah,
how to do it. And that lack of, ability to transfer that energy into what you need to do, like you said, that's disconnect.
yeah,
You're not even, able to connect with yourself. So how can you connect with those external things in your life?
right. So good. So, what are some unique challenges that women face in balancing stressful careers and/or education and trying to maintain their mental health? I know you see a lot of different people across the lifespan. So, from teenagers to college students to, professional women, stay-at-home moms. So, can you talk about like
Yeah.
those challenges when it comes to like we'll talk about career and like education. What are you seeing?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I hear from some of like the younger clients that I work with is, I'm being told to pick a career that's going to allow me to be a mother someday.